Spencer, there's few things in life that I enjoy less than buying a car. It's a big purchase.
Yeah.
Our family has unique needs in that we do carpool with other families in the neighborhood. We are environmentally and fiscally conscientious, and so we like high gas mileage vehicles. And it's just a big decision with a lot of money involved.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of choices.
Yeah.
And when there's a lot of choices and I have emotions and I don't like certain things and I like other things, it just makes car buying really frustrating and really overwhelming. And even when I've decided, okay, this is the type of car that I need for our specific situation,
Right.
once I've narrowed it down, I still have to decide what's the make, model, and vehicle that I want. So it becomes really overwhelming. And as I think about retirement savings vehicles, there's a similar path in that you have to narrow down what your objective is before you even start. So as we think about different retirement savings vehicles, what are maybe some things that we're going to cover today?
Yeah, so we'll look at the big picture in terms of the different options that are out there. As we sit down with clients for the first time, if they're saving and perhaps they've started to put some money away, they may be thinking, which one do I use here?
Yeah.
What are the best options? Because there is an alphabet soup of different vehicles that are out there. Now, sometimes it can be pretty straightforward because your employer may just offer one plan. You may be kind of locked into that plan, but oftentimes there's lots of questions about plans that are outside of what the employer offers, or there may be multiple plans within a couple's employer offerings there that we need to dive into. So today we're going to talk about pre-tax vehicles. This would be, say, your traditional IRA, traditional 401k, 403b, 457 type of plans. Then secondarily, we'll talk about the Roth offering of each of those. So Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth 403b. And then finally, we'll talk about health savings plans.
Great.
And as we dive into that one may be eye-opening for many people because there's a lot of folks that have never really thought through the benefits of a health savings account.
Yeah. So let's dive into these pre-tax vehicles. Spencer, what are the key things that people need to know about these?
Yeah, so I think as we think about pre-tax savings vehicles, most of them would be known as qualified accounts. And we think about qualified accounts, they qualify under this legislation that the government pushed out in the early 1970s known as ERISA. ERISA, it stands for the Employee Retirement Income Security Act. And essentially, the federal government recognized that if they could give an incentive to people to save, that they would have fewer people that were indigent, that they would have to take care of in old age.
Right.
So with one hand, they said, well, we're going to give you a benefit here. If you save, we won't make you pay taxes on the amount that you're saving up to a certain exemption amount there. So whether that's on the traditional IRA side or with an employer-sponsored plan where there's more that you can save, you're not paying federal income tax on the amount that you save. Now you are paying, in most cases, payroll tax on that, but you're not paying that federal income tax. Instead, what they allow you to do is defer taxes on that income, and anything that you invest there then on the gains that you would have over time, provided that you're not pulling those resources out and using them, the gains that you have over time, you're also not paying tax on those, but you do have to pay tax when you pull the resources out down the road.
Right.
Now, this is a nice deal for a lot of folks because for many folks, in your working years, you have a higher income tax bracket, and then when you retire, you have less income, so your taxes are at a lower level.
Right.
Now, the caveat here, of course, is that we're in a fairly low tax environment relative to history, and we're set to see in 2026 taxes revert to where they were back in 2016.
Okay.
So we need to be cognizant of that, but it still is a really nice benefit that we're not paying taxes up front. We're getting those taxes deferred in each of these vehicles.
What else do people need to know about either pre-tax accounts?
Yeah, so at age 72, for the most part, you have to take required minimum distributions on these accounts. If you're still working with the employer and you have, say, a pre-tax 401k or a pre-tax 457 plan, then you're not going to have to take required minimum distributions until you retire.
Okay.
But when you retire, you're going to have to take those required minimum distributions. And the rationale of the government basically on this in making you take distributions is that they want you to take the money out so that you have to pay them tax.
Yeah.
They said, you've had this tax benefit for long enough.
Right.
We want you to take distributions out over time now. And those distributions start at a little bit less than 4% of the account value on a given year. So what happens is the prior year, at the end of the year, December 31st, at the end of that day, there is an account value. Let's say you had an IRA that's worth $1 million. They're going to look at that, and then they're going to apply that factor to it, and they're going to say, okay, how much does that person have to take out on that $1 million based on his or her age?
Right.
So again, at age 72, you have to take out about 3.6% there. That number bumps up so that you're having to take out progressively more. If you live all the way out to age 115, I think you have to take out 50% of your account in that year. So there's a stair-step, level up where they want you to be taking out more and more over time.
Yeah. So as we think about other opportunities, there's something called qualified charitable distribution, right? So can you do that with a traditional IRA? How does that work?
Yeah, so a qualified charitable distribution allows you, just with a traditional IRA, you can't do this with a traditional 401k, you can't do this with a 457 plan or a 403b plan. Just with that traditional IRA, you can designate a charity that receives those resources directly. And what happens is this can help account for your required minimum distribution. So let's say you had to take out $40,000 for your required minimum distribution. If you wanted to give all of those funds to different charities out there, then you could do that, and that would not be, if you file your taxes correctly and you jump through the various hoops, if you give all of those funds away directly via a qualified charitable distribution, that income doesn't get taxed as ordinary income. So that qualified charitable distribution can be really helpful because it can knock down that ordinary income level, and then you can still take your standard deduction over there on the other side of things. So it can be a very, very useful tool in tax management.
That's great. All right, so we're going to shift now over to the Roth retirement savings vehicle. So what do we need to know about Roths?
So Roth is the opposite when we think about the taxation situation. You're paying tax on the front end. You're paying your federal tax, the ordinary income rates. They're on the front end. But any gains in those Roth accounts that you have from that point going forward, provided that you take them out as qualified distributions, which just means that you basically wait until you're age 59 and a half, or that you've had the account open for at least 5 years, whichever is later. So provided that you walk through those guidelines, then anything that you pull out should not be taxed as ordinary income. So you pay the tax up front, but you get that opportunity for growth over time, and then when you pull the resources out, no tax on those resources again if you follow those guidelines. So that can be really helpful, especially if you think taxes are lower now than they may be in the future. This can be great for folks who are early career folks who have a nice trajectory ahead of them that might be making money where they're paying at a rate of 12 or 22% right now. But they think, well, when I get to retirement, I might be paying 25 or 28 or 33% on distribution. So it can be particularly effective there. Now, one of the mismatches here that we want to note in terms of the Roth IRA versus the Roth 401k or Roth 403b is that if you retire and you're age 72, your Roth IRA, you don't have required minimum distributions. But there's somehow a misalignment in law where a Roth 403b or Roth 401k, you still typically have to take distributions if you're retired. So oftentimes it makes sense to explore looking at moving those Roth 403b or Roth 401k assets over to a Roth IRA.
Got it. Okay, so we've got pre-tax, we've got Roth. What else is out there? You mentioned the health savings account.
Health savings, a little known type of account for many people. Oftentimes as we sit down with clients, they don't really understand a health savings account because they equate it with a flexible spending account, an FSA, or they may have just never heard of a health savings account. Health savings account is one of these where you actually get a triple tax benefit. Now, setting kind of expectations up front. You have to be able to contribute to a health savings account. You have to have your health insurance in such a way that you have a high deductible health insurance plan that is HSA eligible. Okay. So that's the first thing that you've got to know there. But if you qualify, then you can put resources into the HSA, and different than the FSA, those resources can be held and used for health costs over time, or they can be invested and they can be deferred, down the road, where you might not use that account for health expenses for 20 or 30 years.
Right.
So it can be really important. Now the FSA, which creates the confusion oftentimes. Typically, it's a use it or lose it on an annual basis. So if you put in $2,000 there, you got to use that $2,000 by the end of the year. The HSA, it's a carryover though.
Okay.
And that's an important thing to understand because there's a triple tax benefit. So if you put resources into an HSA, you get a tax write-off. It's an above the line deduction in that year that you put the resources in. So it's kind of like, in some ways, it's kind of like that pre-tax traditional IRA type of structure where you have a tax deduction on the front end. You're not paying tax on that income.
Right.
You have no tax on the gains, provided that you keep those resources in that HSA. And then if you use the HSA as you take resources out for health expenses, qualifying expenses there, and that can even mean that you're using your HSA down the road to pay for Medicare Part B and Part D premiums. It can be used for other health expenses, whether it's a trip to the doctor or hospital or medical devices, those kinds of things, prescription drugs. As long as you're taking the resources out and using them in that way, there's no tax on those either.
Yeah.
So you're really never paying tax on this amount of money, nor on the gains, if you do things and kind of jump through the hoops that the government wants you to there.
That's great.
So it can be very, very useful, particularly if you think, you can put a substantial amount of money there, over $7,000 as a couple per year. Every year, you can have quite a sum by the time you get to retirement if you do this early in your career.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. So we've gone pre-tax, we've gone Roth, we've talked about the HSA.
Right.
Are there any other types of accounts that clients can save in?
Well, there are. You could, if you look at things and you've filled up all those different buckets. You've explored all the different options there, and you still want to save, then you can save towards what's called a non-qualified account. That's basically an account that, again, it doesn't jump through any of the hoops that was outlined by ERISA in the early 1970s, and so you end up paying tax on any kind of interest or dividends or gains in those accounts on an annual basis. So it just creates a headwind from a tax perspective most of the time. Now, it can make sense if you invest there because you have something an expense that might come up over the next couple of years. Right. Because you don't necessarily want to put something that's earmarked for 2 years down the road into a retirement account that it's hard to tap into until far down the road. So you want to be thoughtful about the amount that you save towards retirement with one of these vehicles. And circling back, actually, one of the things that I had meant to say was the Roth structures, particularly a Roth IRA, any of the resources that you put into a Roth IRA, you can pull those resources out without penalty. You can pull the principal out without penalty at any point in time. So you could be a 35-year-old and you put in $5,000 in a given year. You could take that $5,000 out without penalty. You just couldn't take any of the gains out that you might have received until you get to age 59 and a half or having had it open for 5 years. So the non-qualified account can be useful, but it's not typically the first place that we look to either for retirement or for some of these longer-term expenses if we're trying to meet those needs. Of course, there are 529 accounts that would be educational savings accounts, and we'll talk about that at another time. We'll also get into accounts that are more structured for business owners or entrepreneurs who are just solo business owners that might be solo 401k or defined benefit plans in another video here.
So in light of all that, what's the next step that either clients or people that are interested in this content can take?
So I think first getting a lay of the land. What do you have access to through your employer? For some folks, that's nothing. For some folks, that can be really complex. Like some of our clients at University of Tennessee, they've got access to a whole litany of different options, including a 403B, a 457, a 401k, and a 401a account. That's their optional retirement plan. At any rate, there could be 4 plans or even more, that they have access to. So getting a lay of the land, working with a financial professional to help understand what the best path is can be critical. The other thing that we really didn't dive into here is that employer-sponsored plans, oftentimes there are a limited number of investment options. So we really need to look, what's the cost of investment through those employer-sponsored plans? Oftentimes it's very manageable. It's a low-cost instrument. Sometimes though, if the plan is very small or it's not been managed particularly well, it can be much higher cost. And so we have to look at that. Of course, as well, we also need to know how much matching might there be with this particular vehicle. And so exploring and understanding, each of those pieces, oftentimes if you can provide to us a statement of the plan itself, of what you've saved there already, and then the summary plan description, then we can dive into the details and help you sketch out the next step.
That's great. Well, thanks, Spencer. Again, we've mentioned this before, but make sure that you're talking with a financial professional about this. We are giving general information, and we are giving some specifics, but you want to make sure that you are walking through this information with a professional. So take what we are saying, learn, go do some research yourself, but before you make any decisions, make sure you talk to a financial professional. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. This content was provided by Retirement Planning Services. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you can visit our website at www.seriousretirement.com. The information in this recording is intended for general educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as investment advisory, financial planning, legal, tax, or other professional advice based on your specific situation. Please consult with your professional advisor before taking any action based on its contents.